Keanu Reeves walked through the streets of New York on a frigid December evening, moving unnoticed amid the pulsing holiday energy. The scent of roasted chestnuts and fresh pretzels mingled with the sharp chill of the winter air, while distant carolers' voices wove through the city's endless hum. Towering over Rockefeller Plaza, the famed Christmas tree shimmered in dazzling lights, casting an almost magical glow against the frosty night sky. Among the sea of bundled-up shoppers and late commuters, Keanu Reeves moved unnoticed. Dressed in a simple wool coat, a gray scarf wrapped loosely around his neck, and a pair of well-worn boots, he blended into the crowd. He wasn't one for extravagant outings or personal security details, just a quiet presence navigating the festive chaos. He had just finished signing autographs for a few lucky fans before deciding to grab a quick bite from a familiar hot dog stand. The vendor, a stocky man with a weathered face, greeted him with a nod and prepared his usual mustard, no ketchup. Keanu smiled warmly, paid in cash, and was just about to take a bite when the scream pierced the night like a siren. Heads turned, conversations halted. Keanu froze mid-bite, his brow furrowing as he turned toward the source. A young boy, no older than 9, stood a few feet away, his small frame trembling in an oversized hoodie. His face was gaunt, his eyes wide with something between fear and desperation. His lips were chapped, his nose red from the cold, and the dirt smeared across his cheeks suggested he hadn't seen the warmth of a home in a long time. Keanu lowered the hot dog. "What did you say?" His deep, gentle voice cut through the winter air. The boy's breath came in ragged puffs. "It's poisoned." His voice cracked as he spoke, his hands balling into fists at his sides. A hush fell over the surrounding crowd. The vendor's face went pale. Keanu's sharp instincts kicked in. He crouched slightly, bringing himself closer to the boy's height. "How do you know that?" he asked calmly. The boy's eyes darted around, his small chest rising and falling rapidly. "I saw something earlier. A man. He paid the vendor and whispered something. I didn't hear all of it, but..." His throat bobbed. "Oh, he said something about sending a message." The vendor's voice cracked as he stammered. Hey, this kid is crazy. My food is clean, man." But Keanu wasn't so sure. He studied the boy, taking in the raw fear in his gaze, the way his small fingers twitched, as if resisting the urge to run. Keanu's gut told him there was truth in those words. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a crisp $100 bill, extending it toward the boy. "How about we get you something warm to eat?" But the boy didn't move. He shook his head violently, eyes brimming with unshed tears. "I don't want your money," he whispered. "I want you to believe me." Something in his voice, something so painfully raw, sent a chill down Keanu's spine. He straightened and exhaled, turning back to the vendor, who was now shifting uneasily. The man's forehead glistened with sweat despite the freezing temperature. "All right," Keanu said, his voice steady. "Let's figure this out together." But before he could press further, he noticed the vendor was already packing up his cart, his movements rushed, panicked. He avoided Keanu's gaze, muttering, "I gotta go, man." Too late. Keanu's sharp eyes caught it, the vendor's shaking hands, the way his breathing quickened. He knew something. Keanu stepped forward. "You're not going anywhere." The man froze. But before Keanu could demand answers, the boy suddenly yanked on his sleeve, his voice barely above a whisper. "We have to go. Now." Keanu looked down at him. "Why?" The boy's lower lip trembled. He turned his head slightly, just enough for Keanu to follow his gaze. Across the street, a man in a long black coat stood beneath a broken streetlight. He was watching them. No, not them. The boy. Keanu's entire body tensed. "Come with me," he said, gripping the boy's hand. "Now." And without another word, they slipped into the crowd. Keanu moved swiftly, guiding the boy through the thickening holiday rush, weaving between tourists and last-minute shoppers. The festive lights flickered off the icy sidewalk, but the warmth of the season did nothing to dull the sharp edge of tension tightening in his chest. He risked a glance over his shoulder. The man in the black coat had moved, not chasing them, not yet, but walking with a deliberate pace, his gaze locked on their retreating forms. His presence sent an undeniable warning. "I see you. I know where you are going. You can't outrun me." Keanu tightened his grip on the boy's hand, his instincts on full alert. "What's your name?" Keanu asked, keeping his voice steady as they maneuvered past a street performer playing the violin. "Tyler," the boy whispered, his small fingers trembling against Keanu's. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cause—" "You didn't do anything wrong," Keanu interrupted firmly. "You did the right thing." He led Tyler through the shifting crowd, his mind working rapidly. He needed a place where they could talk, somewhere safe, away from prying eyes. Just ahead, a small coffee shop glowed warmly through the snow-dusted streets, a quiet spot tucked between towering department stores. Keanu made a decision. He pulled the door open, guiding Tyler inside. A bell jingled overhead. The scent of fresh coffee and cinnamon greeted them, a stark contrast to the biting cold outside. Keanu ushered Tyler toward a secluded booth at the back of the shop. The boy moved stiffly, his eyes darting toward the door as if expecting the man in the black coat to barge in at any moment. Keanu signaled for a waitress, ordering 2 hot chocolates and a plate of sandwiches. Tyler slid into the seat across from him, pulling his oversized hoodie closer around his thin frame. His teeth were still chattering slightly. "Okay, Tyler," Keanu said, his voice calm but firm. "Tell me everything, from the beginning." Tyler hesitated, fingers gripping the edges of the table. His gaze flickered toward the window, where the snowfall had begun to thicken. Then, with a quiet breath, he spoke. "I was just trying to find something to eat," he admitted, his voice barely audible over the low murmur of other customers. I sleep near the subway entrance most nights. It's warmer there." Keanu's chest tightened, but he said nothing, letting the boy continue. "This morning, I saw a man slip money to the hot dog vendor," Tyler said. "I thought maybe it was just a normal deal, but something felt weird. The vendor was acting nervous, kept looking around. Then the man whispered something." Keanu leaned forward slightly. "Did you hear what he said?" Tyler shook his head. "Not all of it, but I heard something about sending a message." His fingers tightened on the table. "Then I saw him put something in one of the hot dogs." Keanu frowned. "You're sure?" Tyler nodded, his face pale. "I swear." Keanu exhaled, his fingers drumming against the tabletop. The pieces didn't add up. Not yet. But his gut told him this was more than just a scared kid's imagination. Before he could say anything, the waitress returned, setting down the steaming mugs of hot chocolate. Tyler hesitated before wrapping his fingers around the cup, absorbing the warmth. He took a small sip, eyes still darting toward the door. Keanu took a slow breath. He had a choice. He could leave it alone, walk away and let the police handle it, or he could trust his instincts. And Keanu Reeves always trusted his instincts. His decision was made. "Listen," Keanu said, lowering his voice. "You're not alone anymore, okay? I'm going to help you." Tyler looked up at him, hope flickering behind his wary eyes. "But I need you to tell me one more thing," Keanu continued, his voice gentle but firm. "The man you saw, do you know who he is?" Tyler shook his head. "Have you seen him before?" A pause, and then a slow nod. Keanu's spine went rigid. "When?" Tyler's fingers curled around his mug. "A few times," he admitted. "Not always in the same place, but he's always watching." Keanu's heartbeat slowed. "Watching you?" Tyler hesitated, then nodded again. A cold unease settled in Keanu's gut. This wasn't just about the hot dog vendor. This was about Tyler, and now, by stepping in, it was about him too. Before Keanu could say another word, the cafe door swung open, the bell overhead ringing softly. Keanu's entire body tensed. The man in the black coat stepped inside. For a brief moment, he didn't look in their direction. He simply removed his gloves, brushing snow off his shoulders as he scanned the cafe. Then his gaze landed on Tyler. The boy stiffened, his breath hitching. Keanu reached across the table, his grip firm but reassuring on Tyler's arm. "Stay calm," he murmured. "I won't let anything happen." The man didn't approach immediately. Instead, he made his way to the counter, ordering a coffee, taking his time. But Keanu knew the truth. This was no coincidence. The man wasn't here for a drink. Keanu Reeves had spent decades in Hollywood playing characters who could spot a threat from a mile away. And right now, he was living one of those roles. His eyes flickered toward the exit. They had to leave. Now. Keanu stood, pulling out his wallet and dropping more than enough cash on the table. "Let's go," he whispered. Tyler swallowed hard but obeyed, sliding out of the booth. The man at the counter lifted his coffee. He turned his head slightly, and then he smirked. Keanu knew that smirk. It was a warning, a promise. He placed a firm hand on Tyler's shoulder and steered him toward the door, his body tense, ready for whatever came next. The moment they stepped outside, Keanu felt the shift in the air. The city's festive cheer no longer felt warm, it felt suffocating, like they were being watched from every corner. Tyler moved closer to him. "What do we do?" he whispered. Keanu scanned the street. He needed time to think, but he knew one thing: they weren't safe here. "Come on," Keanu said, leading Tyler down the street. His mind worked through every possible option. He could take Tyler to a hotel, but that wasn't safe. A police station? Maybe. But if this man was part of something bigger, they needed to be careful. Then an idea sparked. Someone he trusted. Someone who could help. Keanu pulled out his phone, dialing quickly. "Keanu?" The voice on the other end was warm, familiar. "Sandra," he said, his voice firm but calm. "I need your help." Sandra Bullock didn't hesitate. "Where are you?" Keanu exhaled. "I'll explain everything when we get there." He hung up, tucking his phone away. "Who was that?" Tyler asked, his breath misting in the cold. "A friend," Keanu said, guiding him toward the subway entrance. "One we can trust." As they disappeared into the station, Keanu couldn't shake the feeling creeping down his spine. The man in the black coat wasn't just following them. He was waiting. For what? Keanu didn't know. But he was going to find out, and he was going to make sure, no matter what it took, that Tyler never had to run again. The subway station was nearly empty, save for a few late-night commuters and a man slumped in the corner, half asleep against a pillar. The distant rumble of an approaching train vibrated through the ground. Tyler kept close to Keanu, his small frame shivering despite the relative warmth underground. Keanu scanned the station, his instincts sharper than ever. His mind was running calculations. If they were being followed, where would their pursuers come from? How many ways out were there? Was the man in the black coat alone, or was he part of something bigger? Tyler tugged at his sleeve, his voice barely above a whisper. "Do you think he followed us?" Keanu crouched slightly to meet his gaze. "I don't know yet, but we're not taking any chances." He nodded toward the approaching train. "We're getting on, but we won't stay long. Just long enough to make sure we shake anyone watching us." Tyler swallowed and nodded. The train doors slid open with a mechanical hiss, and Keanu guided Tyler inside. The car was only half full, an older woman reading a book, a young couple sharing a pair of earbuds, and a man in a heavy coat staring out the window. Keanu sat at the far end, positioning Tyler between himself and the wall. His senses were on high alert, every shift of movement, every glance from a stranger analyzed in seconds. The train jerked forward, plunging them into the tunnels beneath the city. For a few moments, silence reigned, broken only by the rhythmic clatter of metal against metal. Then, Tyler spoke. "Why are you helping me?" Keanu glanced down at him. The boy had pulled his hoodie tighter around his thin frame, his expression cautious but hopeful. "Because I can," Keanu said simply. "And because no kid should be running around alone at night, afraid of what's lurking in the shadows." Tyler looked down at his hands. "People usually don't care." Keanu exhaled slowly. "They should." The train jolted as it slowed for the next station. Keanu's eyes snapped up, scanning the platform as the doors opened. A handful of passengers stepped on, a few getting off. He felt a prickle of unease as a man in a dark hoodie stepped inside, keeping his head low, hands stuffed into his pockets. Keanu's grip on the seat tightened. Something about the man was off. "Stay close," Keanu murmured. Tyler, sensing the shift in atmosphere, slid a little closer. The train started again. The man in the hoodie remained standing near the door, not holding onto anything to steady himself. He was waiting. Keanu knew this move well. He had seen it in movies, in real life. It was the stance of someone who wanted to act quickly, to move before anyone could react. Keanu leaned down slightly. When the doors open next, we're getting off. Tyler gave a small nod. The next station was coming up. Keanu's heartbeat remained steady, but his body tensed like a coiled spring. As soon as the doors slid open, he took Tyler's wrist and stepped off the train in one smooth motion, leading him through the platform. The man in the hoodie reacted instantly. He moved to follow. Keanu had anticipated it. He suddenly changed direction, pulling Tyler toward a stairwell leading back to street level. They ran, Tyler struggling to keep pace with Keanu's longer strides. Footsteps echoed behind them. They burst onto the street, the cold slapping them like a wall. The city was quieter now, the holiday cheer dimming as the late hours crept in. Keanu didn't slow. He knew better than to stop and look back. They needed distance. A cab was idling by the curb, its driver half asleep against the steering wheel. Keanu pulled the door open, pushing Tyler inside before sliding in himself. "Drive," Keanu said firmly. The cab driver blinked in confusion. "Where to?" Keanu's mind worked quickly. "East Village. Now." The driver hesitated only a second before pulling away from the curb. Keanu let out a slow breath. Tyler sat in silence, his breath coming in short bursts. "Who was that?" he finally asked. Keanu kept his gaze fixed on the side mirror. The man in the hoodie had emerged onto the street, searching for them. He turned his head sharply, pulling out a phone. Keanu's stomach twisted. "They're tracking us," he murmured. Tyler paled. "How?" Keanu shook his head. "Not sure, but we're going to make sure they don't get another chance." The cab sped through the city streets, weaving through traffic. Keanu reached into his pocket, pulling out his phone. Sandra answered on the second ring. "Keanu?" "We're close," he said, "but we've got company." There was a pause, then Sandra's voice turned serious. "Come straight in through the back, I'll handle the front." Keanu nodded, even though she couldn't see him. "See you soon." He hung up, shoving the phone back into his coat. "Where are we going?" Tyler asked. "Somewhere safe." The cab pulled to a stop outside a brownstone, its windows glowing warmly against the cold. Keanu wasted no time paying the driver. He stepped out, scanning the street before helping Tyler onto the sidewalk. They moved quickly, cutting around the building into the narrow alley behind it. Keanu knocked 3 times against the back door. A second later, it opened. Sandra Bullock stood there, dressed casually in a sweater and jeans, her expression both concerned and determined. "Get inside," she said. Keanu ushered Tyler in, closing the door behind them. Sandra studied the boy for a moment before looking back at Keanu. "Tell me everything," Keanu sighed, running a hand through his hair. "It's a long story." "Good thing I've got time," Sandra said, crossing her arms. "Start talking." Tyler shifted awkwardly, glancing between them. He looked out of place in the warmth of Sandra's home, as if he wasn't sure he belonged. Sandra noticed. She knelt in front of him, her voice softening. "You're safe here, okay?" Tyler hesitated before nodding. She smiled gently. "How about some hot chocolate while you two explain?" Tyler looked at Keanu for approval. Keanu gave a small nod. Sandra disappeared into the kitchen. Keanu sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "This is bigger than I thought," he admitted. Sandra returned with 3 mugs, setting them down. "How bad?" Keanu met her gaze. "Bad," Sandra exhaled. "All right, what's the plan?" Keanu looked at Tyler, then back at her. "We figure out who they are, and we stop them." Sandra raised an eyebrow. "Just like that?" Keanu gave a small, wry smile. "You know me." Sandra shook her head, but there was affection in her gaze. "Yeah, I do." Tyler sipped his hot chocolate, his small fingers curling around the warm mug. For the first time that night, his shoulders seemed to relax, just a little. Keanu knew this was only the beginning, but one thing was clear. Tyler wasn't alone anymore, and no matter what came next, Keanu would make sure he never had to be. The quiet hum of the heater filled Sandra's brownstone, casting a cozy warmth over the living room. The soft glow of the fireplace flickered against the walls, offering a stark contrast to the icy fear still lingering in the air. Tyler sat curled up in the oversized chair, his small hands wrapped around the mug of hot chocolate. as if it were his last source of warmth in the world. Keanu stood near the window, his eyes scanning the street outside. The snowfall had thickened, blurring the city lights, but he wasn't looking at the scenery. He was looking for movement, for shadows lurking where they shouldn't be. Sandra watched him, arms crossed. "You think they found us?" she asked, keeping her voice low. Keanu exhaled, finally stepping away from the window. "Not yet, but they're close." He glanced at Tyler. The boy hadn't spoken much since they arrived, though his eyes constantly darted toward the door, his small body wound tight like a spring. Sandra sat on the couch, her tone gentle but serious. "So what do we know? Who are they? What do they want?" Keanu sighed, running a hand through his hair. "It started with the hot dog stand," he said. "But it's bigger than that. They were tracking Tyler long before I got involved." Tyler stiffened at the mention of his name, but he didn't look up. His fingers tightened around the mug. Sandra leaned forward. "Why? What do they want from him?" Keanu hesitated, then turned to Tyler. "You said you've seen that man before, not just today." Tyler swallowed, his voice small. "Yeah." Keanu crouched in front of him. "Can you tell us more? Anything you remember, no matter how small?" Tyler bit his lip, eyes darting between Keanu and Sandra. He hesitated, then slowly nodded. "I think," his voice trembled, "I think they were after my mom, too." Sandra's brows furrowed. "Your mom?" Tyler nodded, staring at his lap. "She disappeared 2 years ago. His breath hitched. "She always told me that if anything ever happened to her, I had to run, that people might come looking for me." A heavy silence fell over the room. Keanu exchanged a glance with Sandra. This wasn't just about a poisoned hot dog. This was bigger, much bigger. "Do you remember anything about her?" Keanu asked carefully. "Where she worked? Anyone she was involved with?" Tyler shook his head. "She never told me much. She just said that we had to be careful, that there were people who wanted things from her." His small hands trembled as he gripped the mug, and then one night, she was just gone. Sandra's expression softened. "Did the police look for her?" Tyler gave a bitter laugh, one that didn't belong on the lips of a 9-year-old. "They didn't care," he murmured. "She was just another missing person." His voice dropped lower. "And I was just another homeless kid." Keanu felt something tighten in his chest. He had seen it before, how easily the world overlooked kids like Tyler. Not this time. Keanu stood, his mind already working through the possibilities. We need to figure out who his mother was. If she knew something, if she was running from someone, that means they think Tyler has whatever she left behind. Sandra nodded. "We need to dig into her past, find out where she worked, who she was involved with." Tyler hesitated. I don't even know where to start." Keanu gave him a reassuring nod. "You don't have to. We'll figure it out together." Before Tyler could respond, a loud knock echoed through the brownstone. All three of them froze. Sandra's eyes widened. "You expecting someone?" Keanu didn't answer. He moved toward the door silently, his every muscle tense. Another knock. Then a voice. "Keanu? It's me." Keanu exhaled sharply, relief washing over him. He unlocked the door and pulled it open. Lawrence Fishburne stepped inside, shaking snow from his shoulders. His presence immediately filled the room with a steady, unshakable calm. Sandra smirked. "You always show up at the right time." Lawrence shrugged, his deep voice as steady as ever. "Keanu called me, said he needed backup." Keanu closed the door behind him. "It's worse than we thought." Lawrence's sharp eyes landed on Tyler. He took in the boy's small frame, the wary way he watched him. "Is the kid?" Tyler nodded hesitantly. Lawrence's gaze softened. "You okay, kid?" Tyler shrugged. "I guess." Lawrence looked back at Keanu. "I made some calls. You were right. This isn't random. Whoever's after him, they're organized." Keanu's jaw clenched. "How bad?" Lawrence sighed. "Bad enough that I had to make sure I wasn't followed just getting here." He turned to Tyler. "He said your mom disappeared 2 years ago?" Tyler nodded. Lawrence exchanged a look with Keanu. "That lines up with a case I heard about. A woman, Vanessa Holloway. She was connected to some pretty dangerous people who went underground right after she vanished. Tyler's eyes widened. "That's her name," he whispered. Sandra sucked in a breath. Then it's not a coincidence. They were after her, and now they're after him. Keanu turned to Lawrence. "What do they think he has?" Lawrence shook his head. "Not sure. But if it's enough to make them track him for 2 years, it's something big." Keanu ran a hand through his hair. "So we need to find out what she was hiding before they do." Sandra crossed her arms. "And how do we do that?" Lawrence smirked. "We go digging." Keanu nodded. "We start with where she worked. If she was involved in something dangerous, someone there might know what happened to her." Sandra stood. "I'll pull up any public records, see if she had any known associates." Keanu turned to Tyler. "Think you can remember anything else? Any places she took you, people she trusted?" Tyler hesitated, then slowly he said, "There was one place." All eyes turned to him. Tyler swallowed hard. "She used to take me to this building. I don't know what it was for. She always said we were just visiting a friend, but she was always nervous when we went." Keanu leaned in. "Do you remember where it was?" Tyler nodded. "Near the river. Big old warehouse. Had this weird symbol on the side, like a red star but broken." Lawrence stiffened. "I know that place." Sandra frowned. "What is it?" Lawrence exhaled. "Not good." Keanu's mind was already racing. They had a lead, they had a name, and now they had a location. But they weren't the only ones looking. Time was running out. Keanu sat back in his chair, his mind already working through their next move. If Tyler's mother had been visiting that warehouse in secret, then whatever she had been hiding, whatever these people wanted, was likely connected to that place. The problem was, if it had been 2 years since she disappeared, then chances were whoever was looking for her had already searched it. Sandra drummed her fingers against the coffee table. "We're walking into something dangerous, aren't we?" Lawrence nodded. "No doubt. If that warehouse is tied to anything big, it won't be sitting empty. And if these guys have been tracking Tyler, they'll be watching it too." Keanu exhaled. "Then we don't go in blind." Tyler shifted uneasily, his small fingers gripping the edge of his hoodie. "What if—" He hesitated, glancing at each of them before lowering his gaze. "What if it's all gone? What if there's nothing left? What if I don't actually matter?" Keanu frowned, his heart tightening at the boy's words. He leaned forward, resting his forearms on his knees. "Listen to me, Tyler. You matter. Whatever your mom was trying to protect, she risked everything for you. That means something." Tyler didn't respond immediately, but after a moment, he nodded. Lawrence stood. "Then we better get moving. The longer we wait, the less chance we have of finding anything useful." Sandra sighed. "You guys go ahead. I'll stay back and keep digging through the records. If anything comes up, I'll let you know." Keanu glanced at her, knowing she was doing her best to keep a level head, but the worry in her eyes was impossible to ignore. "We'll be careful," he assured her. She gave him a small, knowing smile. "You're never careful, Keanu." Lawrence chuckled. "She's got a point." Keanu smirked. "Then I'll try something new," he turned to Tyler. "You ready?" The boy hesitated, but then he squared his shoulders and nodded. With that, the three of them left the warmth of Sandra's brownstone, stepping back into the cold New York night. The drive to the East River was quiet, save for the occasional hum of the tires against the wet pavement. Tyler sat in the back seat, staring out the window, watching the world blur past him. Keanu could tell he was lost in thought, but he didn't press him. Lawrence drove, his hands steady on the wheel. "You ever been in a situation like this before?" he asked, glancing at Keanu. Keanu let out a breathy chuckle. "Not exactly. Most of the time, I get paid to pretend," Lawrence smirked. "Well, welcome to the real thing." They pulled up a block away from the warehouse, keeping their distance. The building loomed ahead, its rusted exterior half hidden by fog rolling in from the river. It looked abandoned, but Keanu had been around long enough to know appearances could be deceiving. Lawrence parked. "We go in quiet, check the perimeter. If there's any movement inside, we stay low and get the hell out." Keanu nodded. "Got it." Tyler looked between them. And if there's something in there? Keanu met his gaze. Then we figure out why your mom brought you here. They climbed out of the car, the wind whipping against them. The air smelled of salt and metal, the distant creak of the docks echoing in the silence. Keanu moved first, keeping close to the shadows, his boots silent against the wet pavement. Lawrence followed, his movements just as practiced. Tyler kept close, mimicking their steps. As they approached the warehouse, Keanu's sharp eyes scanned for signs of recent activity. The ground was damp from melted snow, but there were faint footprints near the loading dock. Someone had been here. Lawrence pulled out a small flashlight, shielding the beam with his hand as he scanned the entrance. The old metal door was slightly ajar. Keanu exchanged a look with him. Not a good sign. They slipped inside, the scent of dust and oil thick in the air. The warehouse was dark, lit only by faint moonlight seeping through the broken windows. Stacks of old crates and rusted machinery lined the walls, but otherwise the space was empty. Keanu stepped carefully, his footsteps muffled by the grime-covered floor. Tyler stuck close to his side, his breath shallow. Lawrence moved toward a small office space near the back. If there's anything left, it's in here. Keanu nodded, motioning for Tyler to stay close. The office door was locked, but Lawrence gave it a sharp shove, forcing it open. The inside was cramped, papers scattered across the desk, dust coating every surface. Keanu flipped through some of the files, but most were too old to be relevant. Tyler stepped forward, his eyes scanning the room. Then, suddenly, he froze. Keanu noticed. "What is it?" Tyler hesitated, then pointed toward a cabinet in the corner. "That was my mom's." Keanu's chest tightened. Lawrence wasted no time pulling the cabinet open. Inside, among old documents and rusted office supplies, was a small metal box. Keanu reached for it, brushing off the dust. The lid was locked. Tyler bit his lip. She always carried a necklace with a key. Keanu turned to him. "Do you still have it?" Tyler reached into his hoodie, pulling out a small silver chain. At the end, dangled a tiny, intricate key. Keanu's breath hitched. 2 years. His mother had vanished 2 years ago, but she had left this key behind. She had known this moment would come. "Go ahead," Keanu said softly. Tyler hesitated only a moment before stepping forward and fitting the key into the lock. It clicked open with a quiet snap. Inside the box was a collection of old documents, a worn photograph, and a flash drive. Lawrence grabbed the papers, skimming them quickly. His expression darkened. "This isn't just about her," he muttered. "This is way bigger." Keanu frowned. "What do you mean?" Lawrence turned the papers so Keanu could see. Names, dates, bank transactions tied to high-ranking officials, evidence of corruption. Keanu let out a slow breath. "This is what they're after." Tyler stared at the papers, confusion and fear swirling in his eyes. "What does it mean?" Keanu placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "It means your mom was trying to take down something big, and they've been looking for this ever since." Before anyone could say another word, a loud bang echoed through the warehouse. Keanu's instincts kicked in immediately. They weren't alone. Lawrence shoved the documents into his coat. "We need to go, now!" Keanu grabbed Tyler's hand. "Stay with me." They moved quickly, weaving through the stacks of crates, their footsteps muffled against the dusty floor. Another bang, closer this time. Then, a voice. "You should have left it alone, Reeves." Keanu's blood went cold. The man in the black coat stood in the shadows near the entrance, his smirk razor-sharp. He wasn't alone. 3 other figures moved beside him, their silhouettes shifting in the dim light. Keanu positioned, threw himself between them and Tyler, his mind racing. They had what these people wanted, and they weren't going to walk away without a fight. Enjoyed this story? Watch the next video for another great one, and be sure to subscribe for more exciting tales.